Okay. So we had a couple of questions come through for the Q&A this week. First question is, those who are self-realized have given up their desires, but each one still acts differently. Does that mean that their true nature doesn't ever go away? Okay, so to answer this question, we need to understand what we mean by the phrase self-realization. So this is one of the ways that we define spiritual growth and the ultimate state of spiritual enlightenment. It's referring to the removal of all desires, the removal of ego and the removal of ego-centered desires. So the question relates to desire and action. So let's have a look at then the role of desire in an action per se for all of us, for you and me. So we start the process, or we start our understanding, or we can understand desire as starting with what we call vasana. So vasana is a term from Sanskrit. You can think of it as the dormant seed. So when we say it's dormant, what we mean is that it isn't expressing in any way in your personality. You may have a desire for ice hockey, but until I said that word, you didn't have any thoughts about ice hockey. You had no desires for it. You weren't acting towards it. It was lying completely dormant. When you're in deep sleep, your whole personality is dormant. Nothing is happening. So the vasana, or the seed, is where it all starts. The next level of expression is a thought. Just a single, simple thought streaking across awareness. What about? Some object comes to you. As that thought builds in intensity and momentum, as you repeat that thought over and over, we build a desire. So a desire now is a consolidated thought flow flowing on its own towards some object. When that desire reaches a tipping point, we are propelled into action. So what that means is the desire prompts us to act to get its fulfillment. So we use the term ice hockey. Let's say that you have a thought about ice hockey. Nothing else happens. It's just a reminder, a memory of something. Then you have a desire to watch it. Yeah, I wouldn't mind watching that amazing final between the US and Russia from a few years ago. And that thought builds and builds until you get up from your chair, you go to your desk, you go to YouTube, and you start watching it. The desire has become an action. And the actions that we perform carry with them the impressions for more of the same. So this cycle of action, vasana, thought, desire, action. So what does it mean to remove desires? Okay, we can understand that by looking at the distinction between child and adult. When you are a child, you have desires for the toy world. They mean something to you. You have value for them. You pursue them. When they are taken away, you feel a sense of loss. When you're an adult, what's your relationship to toys? You don't really think about them. You don't have any desire for them. You don't pursue them. If you happen to have toys and they get taken away, you don't feel a sense of loss. You've grown out of your desires for the child world. So if we take that analogy, then a self-realized soul is what you might call a spiritual adult. So they have outgrown all desires, not just for the toy world, but for anything that the world can offer at any age, at any stage of development. So that individual, and in fact, that word is actually wrong, but we have to borrow some terms just to communicate. That individual no longer identifies themselves as the child who wants things from the child's world, or the youth who wants things from the youth world, or the adult who wants adult toys. There's no identification with any of the desires that we are familiar with. They've been eradicated or grown out of. So then how do they identify? What do they identify as? They identify with that pure sense of I am. When you're a child, you say, I am a little boy. I am a teenager. I am an adult. I am an old man. The identity that you have at each stage is different. The desires that you have are different. You view the world through those desires. A self-realized soul has none of that. No identity defined by desires. Instead of I am something, it's just a pure sense of I am. So there's a beautiful verse in the text Bhagavad Gita, and he uses an analogy of gems all on a string. So the gems are of different colors, different qualities, different values, different shapes, different sizes. But what links them all together is that thread. In the same way, your desires, your experiences are all of different qualities, shapes, values, intensities, etc. But what links them all is that sense of I am. I am the one who desires this. Later, I am the one who desires that. I am a child, I'm an adult. This and that are different. The child and the adult are different, but what is the same is that common thread of I am that runs through all of your experiences. That is what the self-realized soul identifies with. Okay, so that's a little bit about self-realization. Go back to the question. If actions arise from desire, does that mean when there's no desire, there is no action? Well, clearly not. When we observe a self-realized soul, we see them acting in the world. So action continues. So we might ask the further question, if self-realization is to have no desires or desirelessness, then why do different realized souls act differently? If they all identify as that sense of I am, then why do we see different behaviors, different lifestyles, different choices being made? The best way to answer this perhaps is with an analogy. And this analogy is presented in the text Vedanta Treatise by the author Swami A. Parthasarathy. So it's the car fuel analogy. So imagine you have a car with gasoline in its tank. That gasoline flows to the engine and it drives the car forward. So the car is traveling at great speed, propelled by the fuel that has been consumed by the engine. What happens to the car? Keeps driving, keeps driving, keeps driving. At some point, the last drop of fuel is consumed. It's gone. What happens to the car? Well, the car continues to move. The car doesn't come to a complete stop, of course. It continues to move based upon whatever momentum it had at that minute, at that last moment when the fuel was gone. After a period of time, what happens? The car comes to rest. Whatever momentum it had acquired at that moment is spent and it comes to a stop. So how does this relate to our understanding of the self-realized soul? So let's track the two sides of the analogy. A car has that forward propulsion while there is fuel. So that's referring to any one of us, the individual who has a personal motivation while there is desire present in the personality. The car continues to move when all of the fuel is gone. In the same way, the self-realized soul continues to act even when all of the desires are gone. The car will move based upon the type of car that it is, its weight, how efficient it is, its friction against the road, all of these things, and the momentum that it had when that last drop was used up. In a similar way, and this is the key point here, the self-realized soul will continue to act based upon whatever momentum their personality had acquired at the time of enlightenment. So if at the time of enlightenment, the individual had a great interest in speaking to people and teaching and writing, then that self-realized soul will continue to speak and teach and write. If at the time of enlightenment, the personality of that individual was engaged in artistic activities, creative activities, painting, music, then that is the behavior that you'll see coming from the self-realized soul. The momentum will continue on. Going back to the analogy, that car will keep moving until the momentum is spent. In a similar way, the self-realized soul will continue to act until their own nature is exhausted. And that is the point of physical death of the self-realized soul. The self-realized each act differently. Does this mean their true nature doesn't go away? The self-realized soul's actions are based on the nature of their particular body, mind, intellect at the time of enlightenment. Now, this is not their true nature. This is the nature of the matter equipments, body, mind, and intellect, all made of matter. Their true nature is not the body, mind, intellect. Their true nature is the self with a capital S. Their true nature is that pure sense of I am. They've discarded the desires and they've discarded the identity that those desires are based on. That is their true nature. That is what they have come to realize. And that, they tell us, is what we are here to realize as well. Find out who you are. Okay, second question has come through. Second question has come through. It is said, never follow the life of an evolved person. Follow what they say, not what they do. However, this negates model behavior theory. For example, don't listen to a marriage theorist if they have been divorced. Isn't the point to live what you are saying? So this is something that is often said when we are relating to a highly evolved person or even a self-realized soul. We're told, don't become preoccupied with their behavior, with their mode of living, with the choices they make. Instead, follow their advice rather than following their behavior. But of course, the objection is, if you see someone acting in a particular way, doesn't that indicate whether or not they are to be followed. So let's explore this a little bit. This idea of modeling behavior. What we can understand is that a person's conduct reveals their values and their maturity. Take a simple example. When you find someone who tells lies to others, we naturally form an opinion about their values, about their level of maturity. When we learn that they lie to people, we form an opinion about who and what they are, and naturally we lose trust. What's happening here is that our opinion is based upon what we conclude about their intention. We may not be aware of this, but this is what we're doing. The reason that we lose trust, the reason that we have a diminished opinion of someone that we see lying, is because we think that that person is serving their own selfish interests, that they don't care about others, that they're not to be trusted. And so we won't trust them with what they say, and we won't trust them with our own personal information. However, other intentions are possible. And when we look at this, we'll start to see what we mean by saying that we're concluding their intention. Take a simple example. Imagine someone says to you, an acquaintance, not a close friend, maybe a work colleague or a friend of a friend, someone you know from the gym. How are things with you and your partner? Now, the truth of the matter is that things at the moment are a little tense. There are some personal issues going on that are causing a sense of division. And actually, you're sort of unhappy and beginning to question the relationship. And yet you say to this person, all good, things are great. Can you really be accused of being a liar at that point? How would you feel if a month later, that same person learned the truth about the relationship and they came to you and said, I can't believe you. You're such a liar. I can't trust you anymore. You'd feel that you were being wrongly accused. What was your motivation when you lied? You weren't serving selfish interests. You weren't trying to deceive the person. You were protecting your own needs. You have a need for privacy. It's important not to have everybody talking about your personal issues. You're protecting your partner's privacy. You don't have their consent to be talking about the elements of your relationship with the world at large. So you were doing the right thing by telling a lie. Your motivation wasn't self-centered, it was your obligation in that moment. Just because somebody asks you a question doesn't mean you have to answer it. What does this show us? It shows us that the same action that we see on the surface can have different underlying intentions, different motivations. And some of those motivations might be aligned to higher values, to moral values. They might be aligned to the person's conscience, and others might not be. The problem for us is that if we lack maturity, we can't even conceive of causes that can come from higher values. Take the example of a child. If a young child learned that that person had lied, they might have a very simplistic, unsophisticated understanding of don't tell lies. They can't conceive of a situation where it's appropriate to do so. When we're talking about our relationship with an evolved person, this is the position that we may be in. Because we are relatively less mature than that person spiritually, we may not have access to the worldview that makes their behavior appropriate for them. It's not appropriate for someone else who is less spiritually mature. You tell a child not to drink alcohol. That's an appropriate boundary because they don't have the maturity to process the experience. An adult does. So it seems like there's a mismatch between what they're saying and what they're doing. But that mismatch only occurs because we lack the mature vision to understand and reconcile it. So that's why it's said, don't become preoccupied with an evolved person's behavior. Second element of the question was saying, listen to what they say. Or the second element of the question was saying, simply follow what they say. Question this. Listen to what they say. Have humility to be receptive to what they are presenting. Understand that I could be wrong. I may lack the vision. What can I learn? If that individual has earned your trust, then you may step into the unknown and follow their advice, follow their guidance, even when you don't understand it. You may make choices that seem to be contrary to the choices that they are making. But if you have this understanding, then that can reconcile it. I'm in the position of less maturity, and so I'm being guided for what is right for me. The person who is guiding me is in a state of higher maturity. They make choices that are right for them. This is the basic, excuse me. This is the basic idea. Even if the person is not in a state of maturity, we have to understand that there may still be value that we can get. You're probably familiar with the phrase, even a broken clock is wrong twice a day. So be open to hearing everything. But that openness must be protected by your rational questioning. Your intellect must lead. Critical thinking. What you then follow is not simply what another person says. What you're following is the inner consensus that you have of intellect, mind, and body. What does that mean? Your intellect leads. So with critical thinking, you have understood the choice in front of you. You've understood why it's beneficial. That's the intellect. What's the mind's participation? The mind's participation is that it feels what the intellect understands. It feels that this is appropriate. And this can be the case even if it doesn't like it. Simple example. You have a beloved pet who is 14 years old. Eyesight is failing, digestion is failing, it's in physical pain, it's confused, perhaps it's become aggressive. Your intellect tells you it might be time to put the pet to sleep. What does your mind tell you? Your mind says, no, I don't want to do it. Your mind rebels. That feeling of loss. At the same time, your mind may feel it's the right thing to do. So this is why the intellect is so important. It can recognize that both of these emotions coexist, that seem to be in opposition to each other. and it can reconcile them. It's okay to feel a sense of loss. It's also okay to feel that it's appropriate to put the pet to sleep. So there is alignment between what the intellect understands and what the mind feels. And finally, there's a gut check, you might say. How does your body feel about it? Do you feel prepared, ready to make that choice? Are you frozen? Can you not bear to pick up the phone and make the call to the vet? Or do you feel a sense of readiness to act? So when we have this alignment, yes, then that's what you follow. So the advice may have come from a self-realized soul. And if you have, or rather, and if that person has earned your trust and your surrender, then you may follow it even when you don't understand it, even when you don't like it. There is, of course, a problem here, or rather, there is, of course, a potential danger here, because trust is a double-edged sword. While it can lead us to greater well-being, it can also be abused. One of the dangers, of course, is that we ignore or justify the bad behavior of someone who has the title of teacher, guide, authority, or guru, but they haven't truly earned it. And so they are acting in ways that are coming from wrong understanding, that are coming from ego, that is self-serving and damaging to others. And what do? We ignore it. We should not get caught up in the behavior of the teacher. We justify it. They're operating from a much higher level. We don't understand. We haven't really said this from a place of genuine knowledge and genuine trust. We're operating from a sense of fear and attachment. And so we allow bad behavior to continue, and we keep ourselves bound in this state of fear and attachment. Another danger, of course, is that we act in the same way as the false teacher, and then we justify it. It could even be more than that. Even if it is a genuine teacher who is operating fully aligned with their conscience, we may then choose to act in the same way and say, well, the teacher does it, so can I. In the same way that a child might say, I've seen my parents drink wine, so can I. So when we get into this kind of mode of acting, we've lost our critical thinking and we've lost true surrender. Because critical thinking and surrender leads us away from our ego-centered behavior. We align ourselves more with what we know to be true, rather than the preferences of this particular individual. It is said, never follow the life of an evolved person. Follow what they say, not what they do. But isn't the point to live with what you are saying? Follow what a person says when you trust them implicitly. Follow what a person says when you trust them implicitly, when it has been earned and when it's gone through your own critical thinking. And recognize that you will not be able to see a perspective that is considerably higher than yours in the same way that a child cannot see an adult's values. But also recognize the double-edged nature of this way of functioning, that it can be abused, and that it's your responsibility to protect yourself. Okay, those are the questions that we had come through for today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email them through to glenn@vedantala.org. That's VEDANTALA.org. And it's Glenn with one N. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.